Welcome to this episode of the Level Design Podcast. I am Mark Drew, and in this episode we have Rich Metson. I'm going to try to say the name of the company, but I can read it. Samophus? Samophus.
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close.
Is this a trick company name to trick us podcasters?
It is actually, wrong? Yeah. It's just to try and trip up as many people as possible. Yeah. I actually find that people find it quite memorable that they don't know how to pronounce it.
Right, and that's a good trick, right? Is like stand out from, Bob Craggett Designs or something.
And maybe there's something in that as a lesson for level design as well.
Right.
People remember being tripped up or finding a difficulty and coming back.
Finding the solution to something that you're stuck in will stay in your mind. We've been doing a whole bunch of recording recently, and we were talking with Jay Britton about Prey. Now that's like a lot of level design in the whole game of Prey. But one of the things that I just remember, one area that I was completely stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the area that is like still to this moment is, and then I found a way around it, but it took me a while.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, of course, that game, there's many ways to solve a problem, but this one was like, God damn it, I don't know how to do it.
I have a similar one in Metal Gear Solid 3, where there's just a specific section where I think there's a bunch of rooms with researchers or scientists that you end up running back and forth through. And it sticks with me too. And that moment where you actually click in your mental mapping of exactly what the layout is and where you're supposed to be and this, that and the other. And the balance is so fine, And that's the thing with game design and level design specifically, is like adding enough frustration in that you're creating a boundary or a solution that's required or an obstacle, but not leaving that frustration in there long enough that people become disengaged with it.
Yeah, slight frustration, good. Complete, like throwing a wrench against the wall, bad. Yeah. And all that comes out of play, right? I mean, when I started getting into this, the first design was it. Like I have to get that right. I was never getting it right, and it was like, well, no, actually, you have to play this. You have to feel it a bit more. There isn't hard and fast rules for this kind of gating.
Yeah.
There are clues and there are patterns, but they're not like, this is how you can frustrate a player for 10 minutes.
Yeah. And it's so different per game, per genre, that your individual approach has to be iterative, because each game you make is going to have different level design challenges for you as a creator. Is
Off-Grid your first game?
Off-Grid is my first original IP.
Okay.
Pontus and I both contracted on other people's games in the past before. Before that, I was an associate producer at BBC Worldwide Games on third-party stuff for a little while. So Top Gear and a few other like Doctor Who IP, stuff like that. So I got to see that kind of third-party publishing side of it, which was interesting. And before that, I had an illustrious career in advertising. I was a tech artist in film and TV, but I mainly made toothpaste adverts.
But that's, this is where a lot of very talented people like yourself have come from. Like
Guy Ritchie was one of those examples that I always think of. I mean, like, take or leave his particular style. Lots of people don't like what Guy Ritchie does, but actually, if you think back to when Lock, Stock came out, he changed certain film language.
Wow, yeah, the whole like action and pose description of the guy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That we now have in Borderlands, for example, and that very fast, hyper cranked, effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
a lot to be learned from advertising, even though I hate it.
My dad worked in advertising, so actually, weirdly enough, advertising's been in the blood. Passed away a few years back, and I had to go through all his stuff, and he had all his stuff from like 70s and 80s, like his work in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, nice.
And it was very interesting. I should have kept a whole bunch of that stuff, because even though it was boring letters, but it was like, here's spreadsheets done literally by drawing a line on a piece of paper, and it's like very meticulous. Okay, you would just use Excel on this, like for example, like mind blown that people had to work this way back then, but it's really
talking about previous careers. The other thing that I did before that was I was a sculptor and a metal worker.
Oh wow.
So I actually left school. I didn't go to university originally. I became a metal worker. My family's background is in farming, and so building gates and pens and things like that, and welding up fences for cows. And
so this is like actual level design in a way.
There you go. That's what I was going to say.
Actual farming level design.
So spatial stuff has been the thing that I've always played and toyed with. So, building shapes and spaces and corridors and catties and, the corrals that you need to get animals into, and what space animals move through and how you can direct them.
Right,
it's interesting to think about it with that level design lens, but there's all those kinds of things that run into probably everyone's life where you've kind of done something that was completely inane that rolls into your level design practice.
Years ago, before I wanted to become an architect, until I found out it's like a 7-year course, and I was like, as a young man, I was like, no, I won't do that. But I was doing a bit of research and watched something before the YouTube existed, but it was like how they managed crowd control, or how they designed spaces for crowd control before you use computer simulation, because there's no way you could do this with. Or if you happened to have a super crate, which a lot of agencies didn't kind of have.
Yeah.
So all they did was build it out of, like card, build like a shopping center card, put water with little things that float in it, just something, and then tilt it, saying like, this is the exit, this is where we want people to go.
Where are the people going to naturally flood to?
Yeah.
Flood to?
Yeah, exactly. Where they're flowing and where they're getting stuck, and seeing how we can do, like, round that off. I mean, make it a bit. And then they're going like, yeah, there you go. And I think it was a Tomorrow's World thing. I was like, oh, I want to become an architect. And then it's, when I've been doing some levels, it's like, well, where would you naturally, if you were water, where would you naturally go? If you were a sheep, you'd go for, not the thing with a big light at the top saying exit. It'd be like, I'd naturally flow to the left or to the right here.
Yeah, with sheep, it's an interesting one. It's a sort of, there's a psychology when you're herding sheep, actually, to literally just being far enough just to the left or the right to make them tick and tack.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that's quite interesting. I don't make horror games, so it doesn't quite apply to what we do.
Yeah.
But you do get chased in Off-Grid, the hacking game we make. And understanding the feeling of someone being behind you and where that's going to direct you is important. It's one of the reasons that actually we put flashlights on the guards that are on all the time, so that you're in a spotlight when you're being chased.
Okay.
And the direction of how the guard is coming around you can be slightly predicted by the way your shadow is being cast.
So you know that he's to the right because your shadow's to the left. Oh, that's very interesting. So Off-Grid, let's talk about Off-Grid just for a second.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's what you would like to talk about. But Off-Grid's an interesting game because it's a hacking game, but it's a stealth game without weapons. But it's also looked like, I'm a developer, web developer, sometime hacker. I'm in SSH shells all day long, going into servers, and all of it. Like, wait a minute, this is looking really, really real.
Yeah, I mean that's we've been described as watchdogs with hacking for that reason, because we felt it was important to make a hacking game that represented, hacking from an authenticity. I don't like the word realism too much because, you're never going to simulate packets properly across networks, and it's not necessarily useful for gameplay or mechanics.
And it's not useful for what a lot of hackers actually do. You'd have a script that does that, right?
Yeah, and then you'd sit for 9 hours and wait for it to come back.
Yeah.
So what we've gone for is a sense of authenticity and picking out the right things that you need for feel to feel like you're in that world. So yeah, shells, SSH, like having port scans and essentially the right amount of terminal text without it becoming, this is a typey hacker game.
Right.
I mean, you could talk about level design in those kind of terminal environment games, probably, because almost like, for instance, an example that we've been doing at my Let's Play stream with, I get hackers in to play hacking games with me on a stream.
Oh,
we
cool.
call it Video Games is Serious Business.
Okay.
We've been playing Hacknet in the last one.
Is this on Twitch or?
Yeah, on Twitch, YouTube. We do a multi-stream.
Okay.
So yeah, if people are interested in hearing a hacker's analysis of hacking games, then come and check that out with us. But so Hacknet was the one we were playing most recently, and you're using Unix commands to navigate your way around different file systems, and they're the same as rooms. You're kind of CD.dotting your way through different places. But Off-Grid takes that step further because the environments you navigate are an attempt to get to different IoT networked devices that are physically in buildings. So you're trying to get through the level in order to gain as much data on the NPCs walking around, to divert them off course, and find leakable documents that help piece together a case that you need to find out. And that's because your hacktivist daughter has been bundled away by the security services.
Oh wow, that's really interesting, and it's not the same, but it's got real interesting parallels. I've been talking to Peter Bottomley from White Paper Games,
I like
with the Occupation, and I think of the Occupation as the prequel of Children of Men, right? Because it's like they have this Union Act in '87, and then Children of Men is in the '90s, and I'm going like, yeah, no, that's the prequel. It's like this is what's all gone wrong, and now, but I see your game as like, yeah, that's continued on, like the hacktivist journalist, or trying to get information. But I like the threat aspect, that there's actually a real goal for them.
Yeah, it's set in a world where essentially privacy and encryption have been degraded a little further than they're already
basically
being done. So exactly, we've taken some real laws and referenced them. There's something called the Digital Economies Bill, which Theresa May attempted to pass over the last couple of years, which essentially was supposed to make it that companies and services couldn't use encryption that GCHQ weren't able to break within 36 hours. So phrased the other way around, you weren't allowed to use encryption that GCHQ didn't already have a backdoor to, which is bonkers. And it's been proposed by every administration around the world at different times and been laughed out the room.
Even if you know a little bit about it, it's kind of strange. It's like, that's my day job, right? It's like web development, and I have to use these security keys all the time. I'm going, yeah, if you can break it in 36 hours, even if you have backdoors to them, means that I have to trust one of your drunken ministers not leaving his suitcase with a USB key with the tool to do that on a train.
Yeah.
Because that's how we've lost data before. And you only need one leak from a government, which a government is essentially thousands of people. So this is not going to get political, right?
The attack surface is massive.
Yeah. It's a massive attack surface. And then it's and half of it is using outdated systems that are incredibly hackable. Look at the NHS, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very prescient game, in that sense.
Yeah, and we've been kind of on that zeitgeist for a while. We actually started, my first notion of wanting to make a game about data privacy and mesh networks, and the idea of needing to build a free and open internet after it had been locked down by some people who were power mad or after absolute safety on the web. Essentially, I came up with the first concept of that around about 2011.
Okay, right.
And then Pontus and I prototyped something in 2013, and it went on the back burner for a while. And in 2016, we started again full time on it and funded. And in that time, we have only had things that we were already doing become more and more relevant to the mainstream. There's nothing has moved on. Nothing has been too of the moment. It's here to stay, sadly.
Yeah,
all that stuff.
It's become more relevant. If in 2007 they got that through, it would be okay, whatever. But then Facebook's come along. I'm saying, and therefore social media's come along. We've expected privacy. A lot of our life is lived online. I mean, I know we do the banking thing, but then we say like your cameras, your lights, your Alexa and Echo, or Alexa,
your washing machine, your smart toaster,
every single phone. I mean, even Batman hit on it, and with the we shouldn't hear every single phone call, and now 2 weeks ago the whole Huawei thing that they're doing all the 5G routers in the UK. It's like great. So who's got the keys for those? Yeah.
So that's where the kind of level design around off-grid kind of bridges two worlds actually, because the mechanics in off-grid are based around. You are a technophobe dad who has no idea about hacking or networks or anything along those lines.
I like that. Just off the beat, you'd always start with like, well, you're an elite hacker.
Yeah, exactly. I hate that. I really dislike being put in the shoes of an expert and then running into a wall first. It just feels so wrong. There's a dissonance there. And so we decided that that's a journey that the player and the character go on at the same time. Your daughter is the expert in this stuff. She's the one that helps you set the VCR. She's the one that makes sure the thermostat is working, that the smart fridge hasn't locked you out. And she's then disappeared, and you're left with absolutely no knowledge as to what is going on. Right. And you have to go on that journey with the guidance of some of her hacktivist friends who have managed to go into hiding and are trying to get you to do the dirty work essentially because they can't, they're in hiding.
Right.
And along the way, they need to teach you how to hack. So the worlds that collide are his kind of bumbling normality and the data sphere, especially
because you got like
the
a different
IoT
view,
data
right?
sphere.
You got there's different views in the game. That you have like, here's the real world, but here's an overlay of the
packets and networks.
And the IoT
yeah,
devices.
it's almost if I mean, you as a web developer will know this term, but I'll explain it for the audience. There's a tool called Wireshark, which is used for what's called packet sniffing. Basically, every single email piece of data is divided up into little packets of information that are sent around, and so Wireshark sniffs these packets and collects the information in a presentable manner for someone who's doing network analysis. In off-grid, that's through the lens of a set of Google glasses that have been set up to be able to see those network packets in a 3D space. So there's some poetic license, but you are navigating through a 3D version, a kind of almost a William Gibson-esque kind of world where the internet is a physical thing. And so those two worlds mesh into the mechanics, the hostility that you face in the levels. So the level design is not just based on the tight spaces that you put people into in given rooms or channels, but also through how densely different data sources are placed next to different IoT devices and which you can exploit, and therefore which guards are most likely to be interacting with which parts of the environment based on the data lying around.
Wow.
So that there's sort of these two brains that you have to wear while you're playing, you know, like I need to navigate the space correctly so I don't trip up or that I don't get spotted, but I also need to navigate the space in the data view in order to be, it's called spectrum in our game, in order to be able to pick up relevant information, profile the AI and the NPCs to work out their behaviors, and then use the environment or the data or the hackable smart devices around them to divert their interests. The level design is revolving around sort of working out what information is available, and so we kind of call that sort of almost like intelligence analysis. You know, you're doing recon based on the data around the world, not just what the corners of the building look like.
Right.
And then
like the cameras that are about, or the
cameras, sensors, whether there is an IoT thermostat that can be manipulated to open up vents. You know, kind of gating in that kind of sense is all based on data and whatever else. But also, like, you very early on learn to profile the guards based on their likes and dislikes. So you can learn that one is a coffee addict. Then you can hack the smart coffee machine to get a voucher from it and spam that voucher to the guard who is a coffee addict. He's more likely to go and take a break and use the coffee machine, but you'll have rigged the coffee machine to dispense double the amount of caffeine, so he's hyped. And if you change two things in the environment, such as the amount of caffeine in the coffee so that it changes one stat on him, the second one would be changing the radio station to his personal favourite music genre, then he'll dance instead of patrol. So, you know, our level design comes about from assessing the psychology of the NPCs as much as the psychology of the player.
Right, because it's not just a navigation, it's a more of a distraction and activity spaces for the NPCs.
Yeah,
right.
And in real hacker parlance, that's called social engineering.
Right.
It's a bona fide way that people get into networks. And it's what you kind of touched on earlier, that the human element is the most vulnerable in any given lockdown system or network. So what hackers tend to attempt to exploit somewhere in the chain is the trustworthiness or the behavioral pattern of someone who has access to that data. And like you said earlier, like someone who is a civil servant who might leave a briefcase on a train, well, it might do it by mistake, or they might be distracted at the right time by someone causing a scuffle at the stop that they need to get off at, or something along those lines.
And some of the social engineering is actually even simpler than people think, right? So, for example, most hotels, I'm using as an example, or pubs or bars or places like that, have two Wi-Fi networks. Have you noticed? One's a locked one, and the one is the underscore guests.
Yep.
You go, I can't get into the guest ones. Can you give me the password for the other one?
Could be
Try
a
it.
network.
They'll probably give you the password. Yeah, okay, fine. Look, it's 4.1 whatever, and now you have access to a Wi-Fi that probably the network engineer did not want public access to, because now you have access to their printers, you have access to their tills to.
And that's exactly the level design space that we navigate in off-grid. When we're doing level designs, we are making hotels or restaurants or newspaper offices, and we're modeling the types of devices that would exist and what networks they might be protected behind, and what data might be sensitive relating to given employees that you need to manipulate. So for us, our level design a lot of the time is about assessing real life spaces and kind of creating a sandbox within that. I've been lucky enough to have a sort of pen pal exchange with Warren Spector over recent months because he came to see a talk of mine at Nordic game where I was talking about the modability of off-grid and how passing those tools and powers over to your audience is important. And
because Upgrade is literally, you can create your own levels if you want.
you can download Unity and our tool suite for Unity. Basically, you make a level given a set of kind of jigsaw pieces, or create your own geometry using a tool like ProBuilder. Then you use our markers for mission objects. You tie a few scripts together for data devices, or the mission script for objectives. And you use our build tool, and it pushes a patch directly to the game or up to Steam Workshop.
Wow.
And so I was really chuffed, like it was like a bucket list thing. Like Warren Spector, creator of Deus Ex and multiple other brilliant games, actually came along to my talk and like wanted to ask me about this, that and the other that I was doing.
Yeah.
I'd watched his keynote as well, so we had like this back and forth conversation over the things that he does that we seem to have subconsciously managed. He talks about this theory of a roller coaster sandbox. So he talks about the notion that many games will be on a track, you know, you're on rails and that's your experience. Or many games will be sandboxes, but he thinks the best place is to be both, so that you're holding the hand and directing the player through individual sandbox areas where you give them a very specific objective, and then you give them a place that they can apply any solution that they want to through it. And that's kind of what we've done with Off-Grid. You know, it's very building based. You know, your objectives are get into the building, get to some kind of router or server that gets you network access of varying levels, manipulate some AI, NPC AI, rather than AI in the theoretical kind of fictional sense. I just mean manipulate the guards, get to some sensitive documents, and get to the roof and put up a mesh network node, which is going to be like a little Raspberry Pi that's the new rebel internet you're building, and leak the documents over that. And each stage, you're going from the bottom of the building to the top of the building. You go through a floor each time, and each floor has a set of different devices that can change the patterns of the guards. The patterns of the guards are dynamic anyway because of the fact that their behavior is based on their personalities and how much coffee they drank anyway. So it's not predictable in the normal sense. Like most people expect a guard's patrol route, you know, in any given stealth game to be, I'm doing this circle and I S back round the corner and I take a P here and then I go back to the thing. Well, in Off-Grid it doesn't quite work like that, because if they use a certain device at a certain time, it's going to change one of their stats in a different way. So they're unpredictable, and then you have to make them predictably unpredictable. If that makes sense. You have to change their hunger, their thirst, or their motivation.
This sounds a lot like some of the stuff that they did in the Occupation with their NPCs.
Cool.
If I remember right, they had boredom. Because they're guards walking around. Nothing's happening, and kind of like their boredom level would increase. And they had things in the area, which I think they were paintings or something, that they'll go up to and go like, I'm going to look at this painting until my boredom level kind of drops down. So like a few minutes.
It's exactly what we do. We have a motivational value and essentially different items for different personalities.
Oh, I see. So like coffee for one, cigarette break for the other. I don't know.
TV for one. Exactly.
That's amazing. It's not out yet, is it?
We'll be doing some form of public beta testing towards the end of the year, and we're like nailing down our release dates closer to then.
So you've had like the community providing content for the alpha? Is that
so with the kit? we did a Kickstarter back in November last year. Part of our Kickstarter was to have what we called first access backers, who backed at a certain tier get access to our 6 weekly builds. So we run sprints whereby we make sure that on the roughly the fifth or sixth week, it's usually the fifth week, as long as we don't hit a serious bug, we deliver something to our Discord community and notify those who aren't on our Discord about the build's up that you've paid for access to. Can you test this new thing, this new bit of onboarding? Can you try this new mechanic? Give us some thoughts. And so we've been with a small test group continually doing that, and then we're planning on.
So the test group is like a tier of Kickstarter.
Yep.
Right. How's that been working out? It seems like they're very invested in both ways. It's like a monetary investment, but you've literally captured a very core market that are going to be there along with you on the way, especially if they're giving like constructive criticism back.
Exactly.
To the
So that they are stakeholders in the project in two different ways, like you say. It's been fantastic. The one thing I will say is modding is going to only be a finite percentage of your players, right?
Right.
And so we have, I think, about 150 of our backers are at that tier or above, and so have access to that kind of thing. But by the time you take the uptake of who has then actually redeemed their key and then regularly reviewed the builds and then actually tried some of the modding tools and then given us feedback or told us when something's been up, the percentile is really, really low. It's down in, got to be sort of 2-3%. So, we've got a handful of maybe sort of 15 or 20 people who muck about with the modding tools. But for us at that scale, it's actually quite good because it's not too much feedback at any given time.
Yeah.
So we have people making things with the modding tools regularly. We know that the API is pretty solid because people have managed to make interesting things already. And then the idea will be to do a public beta towards the end of the year where we get a much larger mass of people to come in and give us feedback on the broader mechanics, the onboarding, and hopefully then get a taste for maybe making some mods also.
That's awesome. What are the challenges in level design for the stealth game? Because you can only do so many doors, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think like cover is difficult in multiple different genres, right? But stealth games especially, because it's not just a case of will I get shot here or not. It's more a case of like what is a guard going to do when he's surprised by you and how is he going to react? There's a lot more to do with doing realistic gestures and moments of thinking for the AI that comes into a stealth game. We've also done a system whereby your light level is essentially given to you as a percentage. It's like your Google glasses essentially have a little light monitor on them.
You've been really thinking about the IoTs, like literally,
we wanted everything to be diegetic. We wanted this to be an actual interface that the character was seeing through the glasses. You have to actually find genuine shadow. So it's a little bit like Thief or Metal Gear Solid 3, in that you have a meter that's telling you, I'm hidden enough, I'm not quite hidden enough. If I move while I'm hidden here, that's going to be a problem, whereas if I stand still, it's going to be probably okay. That's probably the hardest part because that requires a lot of iteration. And when you're doing anything with light, iteration is slow because there's baking times, and if you want to tweak something, it's not the same as changing a collision volume. Right. Lots of sort of pseudo shadow stuff will be, there's like this actual volume that I'm defining and players in it, and they're essentially switched off. The AI will never see you there. So we haven't done that, and I think the hardest part there is actually kind of, it works well for us and it's important because actually we have real-time lights and hackable lights that can be turned on and off, right? So we can't have volumes in that same way unless you're then going to link the volumes that are being turned off by the given light. We decided to go with something that was more simulative from that perspective. So that's a challenge, but it's a good one. And we're starting to build some interesting tools around creating a little kind of set of gizmos that we can move around the level in order to work out whether that's a hidden place or not.
Okay, like light meters
ahead of time. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So it's coming out at the end of the year. It's coming out on Steam, PC?
Yep, Steam PC. It's made with the controller in mind because we wanted to make a game that wasn't sort of a terminal typey hacking game, right? It is.
Well, this is like a limitation, right? It's like, I'm going to make a terminal typey hacking game without a keyboard.
Exactly.
Right. So that's a good constraint because then you have to solve that problem.
Exactly, and that design constraint has been really good for making interesting interfaces for complex elements. So like, how do you exchange PGP keys with someone if you're using an Xbox controller instead of a keyboard and a mouse? So like, a lot of the interfacing has been interesting, and like, how do you SSH with a D-pad?
I wouldn't know where to start.
And it's been grand from that perspective, and partly because my mantra, especially seeing as we want to represent hacker culture in its most authentic manner, and when I say authentic, again, going back to this, I want to represent the culture. I want to represent my friends and my people who are in that space and have lived it.
We should give a shout out to DEF CON. Like, if we're talking about a hacker culture.
Or CCC, which is the European equivalent, because that's where all of my bunch
are okay,
from.
No, fair enough.
So DEF CON is the US kind of major hacker conference, sort of 30,000 attendees, I think. CCC, which is Chaos Communication Congress, is in Germany. And we also have EMF, Electromagnetic Field, which is a bit more of a maker fair, but that's in the UK, and that has all the same hacker villages come along to it. And you're right about this shout out, actually, because the people that are represented in Off Grid are a good bunch of them either based on people I know or they are people I know.
Okay.
So friends of mine like Jake and Mustafa and Darren, who were in LulzSec and were arrested as part of the anonymous operations that LulzSec took part in, and are now reformed folks working for the good of the internet. They feature as cameo characters in the game, and they are people you can meet and talk to and get their insights on what they think hacker culture is. And Millerways, which is a hacker village that is part of CCC and EMF and all those kinds of things, is represented in the game by a guy we know called McFly, who helps run these hacker conferences. So we're genuinely representing real hacker culture and trying to dispel the myth that they are
the bad
guy that's swiping credit cards in a hoodie with a Russian accent, because hackers are sysadmins everywhere. Like you said at the beginning of this, you're a web developer, you've hacked stuff because it's part of your job. Hacking is not a crime. Hacking is making a clever fix to something.
At the end of the day, if there were no hackers, at the moment we'd still have tone phones all over the place. That, people using whistles to get past phones, people... AT&T would have still been doing the same shitty stuff because there's no market. I see like hacker culture in a way like the non-dangerous virus that attacks the system for it to become stronger. You need these probing that are probing. I'm gonna say non-maliciously.
It's like QA of the internet.
Exactly. That's better.
From a game design perspective, it's the QA department of the internet.
Yeah. And we need more of that. We need more hacking, more people probing and going, look what I found. Right? Especially now with Huawei and damn it, we got political real quick, didn't we? But...
Well, it's very hard to not get political with Off Grid. We're one of those games that is firmly planted in creating a platform and a discussion for people's politics around all things digital. It really is unavoidable. And actually, it's unavoidable because hackers are being persecuted left, right, and centre. One of my friends, Lowry, was... being extradited last year to the US over allegedly having broken into the Department of Justice and NASA and a few other places as part of an anonymous operation. And it's important to get those stories across somehow, and they're not represented fairly or equally in the media.
They're always represented really horribly. There's Malware Bytes.
Malware Tech.
Malware Tech. He basically stopped a massive attack, and he's...
Yep, he helped. He was at the forefront of the shutdown of the NHS the vulnerability WannaCry that the NHS was attacked by last year. He stopped a massive ransomware issue. Then he was arrested over possibly having done something naughty in his past beforehand. But that's how these people learn how to do the things they do. They push boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you said before, hackers are consistently pushing boundaries.
It always amazes me. For example, part of DEF CON is like penetration testers, by the way. Another hat that I've worn previously is being a penetration tester. Right? A penetration tester is a hacker. Just putting out there. I mean, it's a fancy name, but I'm trying to see how far into your system I can go by putting a lot of junk into your system and seeing what your system baths out by mistake. And what your system baths out by mistake might give me information about how much further I can go into your system. Right? So
we apply that to our level design again.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, you are spending your time manipulating networks and pressing buttons and sending malformed packets to different devices and seeing what they return. An example being, we simulated a car hack for an electric car that a security researcher called Scott Helm had done a presentation on a couple of years ago at SteelCon. I basically took his presentation and made it in a mod with Harry, one of the devs who was working with me at the time on Off Grid, who's now gone to Unity and is our inside man there.
I see what you're doing.
And so we basically set up this thing where the vulnerability for that car was if you got hold of the VIN number, which is a vehicle identification
which
number,
is not difficult to get hold of,
which is legally displayed on the dashboard.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly.
You could then drop a whole bunch of stuff out of the JSON packet that was being sent to the car in the exchange between the app and the system. Mm-hmm. You could send not even a malformed packet, a packet that you dropped everything except for the VIM number, and it would return the username. It would return either the username or the email address of the purchaser or owner of the car. So then instantly you have your first credential. And it turned out it didn't need a password. So it was the VIM number and the username then sent back a second time would get you in to the device being the car, and from there Scott Helm was able to turn the aircon on and off, the lights on and off, discharge and rapidly charge the battery.
Which is a bit where you could start doing overheating the battery, which...
invalidating the warranty. You could do GPS calls, work out where the car was, so you could actually work out whether someone was at home or not, or if it was something creepier, you could follow someone if need be.
Wow.
And so we modeled that in the game, and that's where again the kind of real life inspiration for different things comes into off-grid and its level design. We find devices and how they affect the environment and what data affects those devices, and then we combine it in a journey through a space.
That's my jam, and well, if anything, hopefully people out there will go and get it, but you've got one. I've signed up.
Awesome.
All right, that's on my wish list. Rich, thank you so much for being on the Level Design Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to get hold of you, what's the best way?
You can find us at Off-Grid the Game on most platforms, so that's like Twitter, Insta, / Off-Grid the Game on Facebook. If you want to join our Discord and join the conversation, then you go to our studio Discord, which is discord.gg/Semaeopus, SEMAEOPUS.
I'll put a link in I think it might be easier if I put a link in there.
There you go. And just jump in and start chatting to us. I'd love to speak to people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And if you want to send us any comments, suggestions, or malformed JSON packets, you can send them to show@leveldesign.fm, or to follow us on Twitter. I mean, why not? What we got to lose apart from your credentials at Level Design FM. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. The Level Design Podcast has been a Command Studio production. Our editor is Matthew Lever, and this episode has been produced by Bridie Rose.